It's so nice to see you all out on this beautiful snowy January day. This is the 7th year of our celebration of Martin Luther King's birthday here in the Meeting House. And we're thrilled to see you all here in spite of the snowflakes. I hope that it wasn't too slippery for you all to come out. We're also simulcasting on our YouTube channel, and so welcome to everybody who's online and who is watching from someplace cozy and warm, I assume maybe in their socks with a hot chocolate. My name is Charles Nazarian, and it's my honor to be your host this afternoon. I'm the president of the Gloucester Meetinghouse Foundation. And some of you may be wondering, what is the Gloucester Meetinghouse Foundation? Isn't this the Unitarian Universalist Church? And you would be absolutely right. This is the Unitarian Universalist Church. But very much like Old North Church in Boston, the building is much, much larger than the congregation that inhabits it today. And about 8 years ago, I was having a chat with Jerry Ackerman, who's here in the audience. And he said to me, well, why don't you go see the vicar at Old North and find out how they're preserving that historic building, which we did. And we created a 501c3 nonprofit whose job it is to do all the major restoration projects on the building. And that's what the Gloucester Meetinghouse Foundation is. Now, for the past 7+ years, I've been making this explanation, and it hasn't always worked, and I don't expect you to get it the first time. But the foundation programs are geared to the community, to use the building as a civic hub, as a wonderful place for music and the arts, and especially for community gatherings like this one. The first floor here has about 300 seats, and when we restore the Horseshoe Gallery, as it's called, there will be about 575 seats. And so we will be able to host much larger gatherings of the community as well as larger concert settings, and we're working very hard towards that. The building, since we created the foundation, has received a full fire sprinkler system and detection system, and most recently the bell tower, which has its original Paul Revere bell, and which we will ring at the end, was just restored after 3 years and about $350,000 worth of work. And our next step is to restore Meeting House Green, which we use every summer for our summer series, as many of you know, because I recognize you from Friday nights. So that's, in a nutshell, how you ended up here this afternoon under the auspices of the Gloucester Meetinghouse Foundation. You also ended up here this afternoon very much as the result of special sponsors for this event. Now, we have series sponsors to whom we are very grateful for our entire September through May programming. But for this one, we have a group of special sponsors, and it was actually Jerry Ackerman who went out and did the asking. And if you're seeing a pattern here, it's correct. When something needs doing, Jerry's one of the people who goes out and does it. And so I want to say a special thanks to John and Molly Burns, to Susan Gray, to Action Inc., to Beverly and Addison Gilbert Hospitals, a member of Beth Israel Lahey Health, the Brace Cove Foundation, the Gloucester Racial Justice Team, and the Manship Artist Residency, which is providing accommodations for Keith Knight while he is here on Cape Ann. Now, we're going to really give them a good round of applause. Keith tells us that he wants to come back with his family, so I think the digs over there are probably pretty good. Just a little bit about our MLK Day celebration. It grows out of the history of this church, going all the way back to John Murray, whose portrait is behind me, and to Judith Sargent Murray, who is on the other side. The term power couple didn't exist back in the post-Revolutionary War period, but they really were a power couple. And John was the chaplain to the Rhode Island Regiment under George Washington because of his progressive views on religion and accepting people of many different faiths. And Judith, who also was connected to the founders, was writing to George Washington and Benjamin Franklin, insisting that women have the vote. And you have to give her credit for being 3 centuries ahead of her time. She also was a great advocate for women's rights, and especially for women's education, because her brothers were all sent to Harvard, but she was homeschooled. And she felt that this was an injustice done to all women, not to be given equal education with men. And so there is a long, long history here embodied by this building of working hard for the equality of all people. This history is not perfect. During our 2006 celebration of the building's bicentennial, we told people the story about Gloucester Dalton, who was an African man who won his freedom coming up to Gloucester working on a ship. And his name is one of the signatures on the original charter from 1785, which is in the historical room. And I'd be happy to show it to you during our break. We were amazed and thrilled that this African-American man was asked by these Brahmins of Gloucester, whose names you would recognize, like Norman and Sargent and Babson, to sign this original document. We thought, well, how progressive, isn't that amazing? But in the past 10 years, we have learned not only that some of the families that signed this document were peripherally involved, but some of them were directly involved with the slave trade. And so this building also expresses that dualism of American history, that we need to acknowledge and be aware of our past. And it's not something to be ashamed of. This is the reality of our history, that African Americans were maligned and put into slavery and built a lot of the things that we get to enjoy today. And I think acknowledging that is a wonderful thing. And the fact that the people in this building, who built this building, also had a progressive move towards being more inclusive and more towards equality. It took a long, long time just to get where we are today, and we still have a long way to go. So that's another way that you ended up here this afternoon. I would like to invite the mayor to say a few words of greeting. We're thrilled to have Mayor Greg Verga with us and keeping up a tradition from the very beginning of these programs. And by the way, the very first one, for those of you who are particularly woke, will appreciate this. The very, very first one that we had started as its first segment, Mary Ellen LaPianca telling us about the indigenous population of Cape Ann. And we have to also look beyond, deeper into our history, also to see how the people who were here before us lived, and to realize that we belong to the land does not belong to us. Mayor Verga.
Okay. Thank you, Charles, and thank you all, and good afternoon. So on behalf of the City of Gloucester, I'm proud to welcome you to today's event, celebrating and honoring the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. And I want to thank the Gloucester Meetinghouse for hosting today's event, and welcome Keith Knight, wherever you are, somewhere. It was great to meet you a few minutes ago, and welcome you to our beautiful city, and to Lanesville, which you seem to be enjoying out there at the manship. And thank you for sharing this meaningful work with us today. I also want to thank members of today's panel for joining in this important conversation and sharing your experiences and your knowledge with us. We're all familiar with Dr. King's selfless work to fight racial inequality and injustice across the United States. In today's world, it's more important than ever that we continue to educate ourselves, raise awareness, and advocate for one another. Just yesterday, I participated in the Gloucester 400th Overture to 2023, where we presented a formal land acknowledgement to the Wampanoag Nation. We formally recognized that Gloucester is located on the traditional and ancestral homeland of the Pawtucket people and their neighboring tribes. This land acknowledgement is an opportunity for Gloucester and its residents to learn about its culture and its complicated history. During the 400th anniversary, our city will prioritize honoring the histories and stories of our community and all who have lived here. We'll celebrate our diversity and continue to educate ourselves as we reflect on our past and look forward to our bright future. I'm looking forward to Keith's presentation today and listening to the meaningful panel discussion. I know that all of you will learn so much from today's event in this critical conversation. I hope that we've all joined together for the work that's being done to ensure a fair and more equitable world and to continue to connect with each other and celebrate our differences. So again, thank you for having me here today, and I look forward to the rest of the event.
Thank you very much, Mayor Verga. Many of you know about Keith Knight's work. He's a cartoonist, rapper, social activist, author, and educator. And you can read the rest in the program, but I think he's probably just an all-around amazing creative person and using that creativity to get at some of the more difficult subjects that we face as a society. We were thrilled when he said that he would come and do his presentation, and I'm going to hand over to him. Keith?
Thanks, everybody. Happy Martin Luther King Day. And yeah, it's true. I love the manship, and I wanna come back and spend some serious time there. It's really nice and pleasant, and it's and I'm so excited because I got to meet a fellow artist who's there, Jerry Russo, who is in the audience. Where are you? Right here. Here he is. He's really wonderful guy and really amazing photographer. So check out his work. Check out his work. Okay, so let me just fire this up. I have a really dirty story that about opening your laptop and, on a big screen, and if you want to ask me about it after, I will tell you all individually. It has nothing to do with me, but it was the most embarrassing thing I've ever seen in my life. Okay, so I just want to make, I'm sorry. Can you set this up for me? I'm not young. Oh, excellent, excellent. Okay. So a lot of you here may have heard of me. Some of you are like, I've never heard of this guy in my life. There's like 2 people here probably who think I'm really famous. And so I'm just going to get you familiar with some of my work so you just know just why are they so happy to see him. Since Tyler Not a year and a half ago, a lot of readers have been asking me this question. Has this once macho he-master gone all soft now that I'm a married man? The answer is yes, I've gone all soft and supple. It's true. The best thing about getting hitched is being able to use all your wife's girly products in the bathroom. Stuff I wouldn't be caught dead buying in public. Okay, let's see. We've got some anti-crab ointment, anal wart remover, and a peach melba loofah scrub. Shh, not so loud with the loofah scrub. That's right, people. No more scrubbing the nether regions with lava soap for me. We've got rosemary and aloe vera and eucalyptus leaves infused with hibiscus shampoo, organic sea kelp and lamb semen exfoliating wash, colloidal oatmeal, and placenta enema. Honestly, y'all, using this stuff does make a difference. A lot of folks have been noticing, gee, your skin feels terrific. So this is my work in a nutshell, which is, it's autobiographical, but it's funny, but it's also hopefully a little bit satirical, a little bit harsh, and so I like to tickle people, and then punch them in the face. That's how I work. And where did I gain this sensibility? Why, that was growing up in Boston. And this is really one of the most famous pictures that I would see growing up in Boston. And I would look at it, and I didn't know much about it, but it really sort of encapsulates America for me, this picture. And for many of you, this is a protest about busing from the 70s in Boston. And really, as a kid growing up, I just didn't really understand it. And it no one ever talked about it in school or anything. In fact, I didn't learn anything about myself in school. I would say that the books that I read, I had animals. I had more books where animals were protagonists than people of color. Animal Farm and, I don't know, some Jack London books and stuff like that. But it was like, where is me? And so I started doing autobiographical cartoons in high school. And they were always centered myself and my friends as the heroes in it, because I wasn't seeing it anywhere else. And it wasn't until I was a junior in high school where I had this amazing English teacher. He assigned us Animal Farm. And, if you're familiar with George Orwell's Animal Farm, the animals take over the farm, kick out the humans, they come up with rules against the humans. So it was the first book that I was really, really into, for how subversive it was. And I said to my teacher, I said, we had to do a book report. I said, I can't do justice to this by doing a mere book report. I'd like to do a comic book report. So this teacher allowed me to do a comic book report. And what I created was a parody of Animal Farm. I had it take place in my high school. And it was me and my friends and all the students take over the school. And we kick out all the teachers. And we came up with rules like under 18 good, over 18 bad. And I did caricatures of all the different teachers. And my teacher, Mr. Hines, was so into it that he kept it and brought it to the teacher's lounge, because there were teachers caricatured in it. So I had all these teachers angry at me. But he gave me an A++, and he said, you captured the essence of Animal Farm, perfectly, but more importantly, you should be doing a syndicated comic strip. And so that was the first time I heard syndicated comic strip. And it was this amazing sort of, oh my God, moment. And so that's what I wanted to do. I didn't have my first black teacher until I was a junior in college. Okay? And I think that's one of the reasons why I wasn't reading anything that reflected my experience. And that teacher was an American literature teacher. And when he assigned us writers, he assigned us Ralph Ellison, Richard Wright, Maya Angelou, and James Baldwin. And when someone asked, like, why are you giving us all black writers? He said, I'm giving you all American writers. And my head exploded, because we are so constantly taught that Mark Twain is American writing. That's it, Mark Twain, And there were so many other writers, so many other experiences that we just don't learn about. And so my work went from being about keg parties to being about what it's like to be a black man growing up in America after this class. And I'm telling you right now, that wouldn't have happened if this guy wasn't in the system. He was working within the system and subverting the system at the same time. And it was amazing. It's so important to have a diversity of teachers from, gender, from race, from experience. Just get and it's interesting that we had talked about sort of the wife who was homeschooled who wanted to go to college. I homeschool my kids now because of the tests that you have to pass at the end of the year. Like you're hog tying these teachers like to teach to a test, and you're not allowing them stuff like what my teacher, Mr. Hines, said, like, go ahead and do a comic book report, you know? Every kid is not the same. That's all I can say is every kid is not the same. So this is some of the work that went, you know, I went from keg parties to comics like this. This is dedicated to that one black kid. This is dedicated to that one black kid who lives in that tiny-ass town off the highway in the middle of nowhere. This is dedicated to that one black kid who was not into hip-hop in high school. Black Sabbath's not black, you know. This is dedicated to that one black kid who gets used as the reason why someone isn't a racist. I can't be prejudiced. My mom invited one to my 13th birthday party. This is dedicated to that one black kid with hair people want to touch all the time. Back off. Is it like a Brillo pad? This is dedicated to that one black kid who gets told they're not really black. Yo, man, brothers don't do what you do. Hey, it's a compliment coming from me. This is dedicated to that one black kid who always gets asked by white folks why they can't use the N-word. Why ask me? I don't use it. But you could if you wanted to. This is dedicated to that one black kid who wonders if they measure up to the myth. This is dedicated to this one black kid. So this is one of my most popular prints. I like to call it Black People Bingo, because when black folks see it for the first time, they're like, yep, that's me. Yep, that's me. Yep, that's me. That's and then, you know, bingo, and it's like the line going across. These were, I didn't know what to call them, but I put them in a comic strip. But they were microaggressions before, you know, the term microaggression existed, and this is something that so many different folks to relate to. You know, I've taken notes from Latinos for that one Latino strip, from that one disabled kid, from that one gay kid. Like, this translates in so many different ways, and people find commonality in this universal experience of being the oddball, being asked all the silly questions and stuff. This is another one of my favorite ones. It always amazes me the way people react when they first enter my bedroom. Holy smokes, what the hell are you doing with that blow-up doll? Folks are often surprised to find a Feel Me Up Wilbur doll in my bedroom, although I don't know why. Tickle Me Elmo may be the #1 doll for America as a whole, but Feel Me Up Wilbur has been selling like hotcakes in the black community. They come in quite handy, although not for the use the manufacturer had originally intended. And he's going, taxi! Saying black man equals stabbed in that back, off duty, off duty. But wait, look, black man plus white guy equals okie dokie. Get the hell in here, boys. You see, because 5 black guys on a corner without Wilbur is a gang. But 5 black men standing on a corner with Wilbur is a basketball team with a coach. They're banned in Boston, so I bought a few to send to my friends back east. Oh my God, look, it's Hootie and the Blowfish. Hootie and the Blowfish is going back on tour this summer. I don't know if you realize that, but they're playing in Raleigh this summer. So yeah, this is, you know, I came up with this one because I was standing on the street in San Francisco trying to catch a cab. This is back in the day when cabs and taxis existed. And I couldn't catch one until a white coworker came up to me, and then a cab stopped right away, and it was like nothing. This is in liberal San Francisco. So now that Uber has taken over and everything, I still take cabs, and what I do is I call cabs all the time, and cabs roll up on me and roll down the window, and I look in, and I look at them, and I go, no, I'm not going to take you. That's not true. I'm not that mean. But cabs are very happy to pick me up now, so that's it's very exciting. So in 1999, I was asked to do a second strip, and they wanted me to do something similar to the K Chronicles, but I didn't want to do it because I already had the K Chronicles. It was multi-panel. It was from my life. I wanted to do something the opposite. I wanted to do a single panel, and I wanted to do stuff from out of the news. And so I came up with Think. It's Think. I know a lot of people say the ink and stuff like that, but it's just Think. But what I noticed with the logo is it looks like Snoopy. If you look it's kind of wild, right? The parentheses look like the ear and the dot. I couldn't draw Snoopy as good as it looks in that logo. So anyway, what I love about Think is I could take these small ideas I can't flesh into longer strips and just do these quickie one-shots. So this is the first one I ever did. Denny's, serving blacks since 1997, if signs told the truth. Now, this was based on this lawsuit that was brought by to Denny's. Some black Secret Servicemen were, and this was happening all across the country. Blacks were being made to pay before they got food. They were being served, like they'd come in before people, and then white people would come in and they'd get served after. First, and so a lot of different things, and it wasn't until the suit was brought against them that Denny's supposedly changed their way. Now, I haven't been to Denny's since 1997, so I have absolutely no idea, but yeah. So I'm going to run through these really quick. Your sister had the baby, it's a boy. The exact moment radical black activist Thomas X realized that, yes indeed, he was an Uncle Tom. What was promised? 40 acres and a mule. What was got? 40 ounces in a pit bull. This just in, police have just released the description of the alleged gunman who's been terrorizing the downtown area. Please don't let it be a black guy. Please don't let it be a Middle Eastern guy. Ha! They'll never catch me. Ah, the power of white privilege. See, we got the Supreme Court leak here. I need another beer. Come on, that's good stuff. All lives matter. Restrictions apply. See skin color for details. The penis monologues with Will Chamberlain, Jimi Hendrix, and Milton Berle. How was it? Way, way too long. Young people ask the older people about that one. I did a lot of research for that one. You're doing this because I'm black, aren't you? Now, see, why do you always have to pull the race card, play the race card? So yeah, the race card, black on black crime. Get over it. It was a long time ago. These are all things that white people say when they don't want to engage in the conversation that America needs to have, and that it's conversation about race. For far too long, the conversation about race went as far as when white people felt uncomfortable, which is about 5.2 seconds, and then it stops. We can't have the conversation when white people are conducting it because it's not a real conversation. We need to have a conversation where the folks who are and I wouldn't say the victims of it because I think we're all victims of it. But you need to hear from the people who are getting it the worst. And so we have to have these real conversations. And it's so indicative of the situation that we have in America where, we have this legacy of this wonderful cultural figure from this city. Oh, no, don't talk about the slave part. Don't talk about the slave part. It is shocking to me how little we learn about the slave trade in this country, about what happened. It is such a huge deal. It's a gigantic deal. It's literally, I always ask, what could you build? What could you build if you had centuries of free labor? Centuries. Just think about that. For far too long, our conversation about race goes like this. One night at Ye Old Gallery opening, frankly, I don't care if a person's black, white, green, purple, or brown. Who the heck are all these green and purple folks white people are always talking about? The K Chronicles by Keith Knight. I'm sorry, I consider myself relatively open-minded, but I have to draw the line at purple people. I know this ain't PC, but purple people are nothing but barely civilized knuckle draggers. Believe me, I sat next to one in second grade. When I was growing up, a purple family moved in next door, and the whole neighborhood started to smell like Fig Newtons. And I swear this one guy got hired at my job just because he was, well, you know. I heard green folks have 3 nipples. I think I'd better be going. Me too. Be careful going back to your car. The purple people might get you. So here's the deal. There are no purple people. There are no green people. Avatar is not a documentary. There are no blue people. Let's couch the conversation in reality. In reality. When you say, oh, I don't see color, that's not a compliment. That is an insult. Because what you're saying is, in order for me to treat you equally, I have to not see you as black. I have to not see you as brown. I have to wipe my feelings away so I can see you as a person that I can talk to. People should be excited by diversity. Schools would be better off. Diversity. Workplaces would be better off with diversity. On boards, in the workplace, in schools. It is an asset, and we have to treat it as such. It's so important. And people always say, oh, Keith, why do you always have to make it about race? Why do you always have to make it about race? I didn't make it about race. Okay? Rich white people made it about race. Rich white people made it about race. They knew that at some point, poor whites would say, why do you have all the wealth? And they said, okay, let's set up this hierarchy so poor white folks can sit there and go, we can make them feel good for it. At least they're white. You know? And it's worked ever since. It's worked ever since. To this day. And because we don't know this history, we're just destined to keep on repeating it. We're doing the same things now that we've done for hundreds of years. Everything's just called something different. So, in 2007, I made the worst mistake of my career. I launched a daily comic strip. So, in 2008, the Nightlife launched, and it was the worst year in newspaper history. The bottom fell out of the industry, all these newspapers. But it was I had my first kid then, and it's like, oh, okay, I need to make some more money. And it was the worst thing I could have done. But there's still a little bit of, the very few people have a daily comic strip. That's what you grow up as a cartoonist. You're like, there's 3 things you want to do. No, 4 things. A daily comic strip, Mad Magazine, New Yorker, and a Christmas special. And so this was, this is my chance to do a daily strip. And so I launched the Nightlife for 11 years. I did 365 strips a year for 11 straight years, and it was a nightmare. But here's a couple of them. Do you think extraterrestrials are racist? Why do you ask? They never abduct people of color. It's easier to catch white people at night. So, what I love about my readers is they are very intelligent. And when this strip ran, I started getting all these emails from people going, oh, you're wrong. You are so wrong. And they sent me the newspaper clip to the first couple that got abducted by aliens. And it was a mixed race couple. It was a black husband and a white wife. And I always say they got caught because of the white wife. So my strip ran in the Boston Herald, I know. It ran in the Washington Post. It ran in the San Francisco Chronicle. Also ran in the San Diego Union Tribune. And this next strip is a Sunday strip, so it's in color, and it got the most mail letters I ever got out of anything. Vet mentoring. A guy in my unit smuggled an IED. Took one for the team. When I got home, I went to tell his loved ones what kind of sacrifice he made. Turns out he was gay. I was the first one to let his partner know what happened. I've shared things with soldiers that I'd never tell family and friends. War does that. Here was a guy who gave his life for his fellow soldiers, but wasn't allowed to share with us who was waiting for him back home. If we're not fighting for this soldier's freedom, then what are we fighting for? So, a couple of things about this strip. One, it's about don't ask, don't tell. It was a silly rule in the military that you could be gay, but you can't tell anybody, which is such a silly thing. When you're putting your life on the line and putting your life, trusting it with other people, you can't be honest and open with them, which is insane. And so I did this strip just trying to put it in a perspective that I hope that people could understand. And understand they did. I started getting all these emails specifically from San Diego, which is a big military town. And people wrote to me and said, your comic strip on Sunday just changed my mind on Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And I got 28 of these letters. You just showed me that Don't Ask, Don't Tell is bullshit. I'm sorry. It's not going to follow me. Sorry. So, I mean, ideally, as a cartoonist, you wish you could create something that would change somebody's mind about something. That's like our fantasy. Like, I'm just going to show this, I'm going to cure the world. And here was evidence that it actually happened. And so, I just want to say this. I told you my strip ran in San Francisco Chronicle, ran in the Washington Post, Sunday Washington Post. This is our 44th president in the Oval Office. And on his desk are the Sunday comics. My strip ran in June of that year. And in October of that year, this 44th president repealed Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Now, I'm not saying I had anything to do with it, but the evidence is right there. Comics can change the world. And it did, and far earlier than when I did it. So this was a comic book that came out in the 50s. And this comic book was printed. There were 250,000 copies that were printed. And it was about the Montgomery bus protests and Rosa Parks. And it was distributed to libraries, churches, and schools all across the country. And it inspired a generation of activists. And it inspired a young man who was 19 years old who joined the movement. His name was John Lewis. And in 2013, Mr. Lewis cosplayed himself, his teenage self, at Comic-Con because his assistant, like, he told him how that comic book inspired him to join the movement. And so his assistant's like, why don't we do a comic book? He's like, nah. And he kept on asking him, come on, like, why don't we do a comic book? He's like, nah. And then finally he came around and was like, okay, but you have to write it for me. So they created March. And March is this wonderful graphic novel. It's a 3-part graphic novel. And he came to Comic-Con in 2013, and it was like the most inspirational, wonderful experience to see this icon, marching through Comic-Con. Cosplaying as himself, like, it's just a super amazing thing. And I pulled out my March books, actually, because I was thinking about bringing it, but, like, I didn't want to pay for the luggage, pay $30 to bring this thing. But apparently I had John Lewis sign my book. So like I forgot about it, but I got his signature in my book, so it makes me so happy. And he's one of the folks that inspire me. So I do prints of people that inspire me, and I love researching them and looking for the quotes that they say, and it's just a wonderful experience. And it's just another way how comics can educate people and inform people. It's really fun. So in 2015, I launched a thing called, I launched a slideshow called They Shoot Black People, Don't They? Because I was doing stuff on Ferguson. And I was just extremely frustrated because I had been doing comics about police brutality for years. And I was like, why do I have to keep on doing this? Like, why does this keep happening? And people, because it was just happening, people were sending them on cell phones. People are like going around going, why is this happening now? Why did this start? It's Obama's fault. It's Obama's fault. So I put this slideshow together and just went around and talked about the history of policing. So I took some of the comics that I've been doing for the past 20 years and put them in there. Mr. White police officer, how many shots does it take for 4 white officers to defend themselves against one unarmed black male? A black male? Well, let's see. Blam, 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 blam. 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 So if you notice, the character in the corner is looking at her watch. That is a trope that cartoonists use for making time go by. Blam, 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 blam. Blam, 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 blam. 41. Don't you think that was a little excessive? Listen, you people could avoid getting into these situations if you would just lighten up. So this is a strip I did after Amadou Diallo, an African immigrant, was shot 41 times in his apartment building, in the lobby of his apartment building, as he was going for his wallet. And when the cops went on trial, the trial was moved to Albany, New York, the whitest part of New York. And they got off because they were defending themselves. And so the point I wanted to make was, when does it go from defense to offense? Is it 20 shots? Is it 30 shots? Is it 40? You know, the marathon bombers, the Boston Marathon bombers, was their trial moved out of Boston? It wasn't, right? I don't know of any trial that gets moved out unless it's police officers and black people. It's crazy. And this is just the system that was designed to work against black folks. It's just a system. And this is the firing range where police officers do target practice. How come all the targets are black? What do you mean? They're silhouettes. They're supposed to be black. I'm talking about the afro and the FUBU logo across the chest. Well, I'll be. So, yeah, that's a basketball in the hand of the silhouette. It could, I've heard people say it was a watermelon. It could work either way. But I did this strip in 2009. In 2013, a woman in Florida, a black woman with the National Guard, wanted to do target practice. She called their local police and said, can I shoot at your range? They said, sure. So she goes in there and goes into the range. And what they had up for targets were not silhouettes. They were black and white photos of young black men as teenagers. And one of them was her brother. And when the police chief did a press conference about it, he said, what we're doing is not illegal. That was it. So you got to ask yourself, this is America. It's not some weird, bizarre thing. If you trace the police all the way back, police grew out of slave patrols. Slave patrols were poor whites who were hired by the rich white people to chase down runaway slaves and keep the black population in order. And the Department of Justice's analysis of the Baltimore and Ferguson police departments in 2016, 2017 said the exact same thing. Their jobs are to keep the poor black and brown population in order. That's it. That's the role. And when people say, oh, well, you know, grow out of the South, the first known slave patrol on record, Charlestown, Massachusetts. And so, you know, one thing that really, growing up in the North, people say, well, at least we're not the South. It's as bad everywhere. It's a yin and a yang. The North exploited, you know, just as much as the South. They used, you know, they paid pennies up here, and they'd say, oh, you're not getting paid down here, so we could pay you nothing up here. Like, you think about all the buildings, like, you know, Harvard owned slaves and Yale, like all these different places. It's all there. And no one can sit there and say, oh, well, at least we did this. It's all a collective thing. You know, this country was built on the backs of enslaved Africans. And we have to understand what that means. Does anyone have a pencil here? Thank you. Thank you. So, I'm going to make a point. It's easier to break something than it is to fix something. Okay? So, 1619 to about 1865. Let's say it's that long. All right? Generations of just, these are not people. They don't exist. They're not human beings. We will work them. We will not pay them. If we want more, we will rape them. We will have more, and we will sell them. We will do this. When slavery was, abolished, what do you think happened? Do you think people were like, oh, you know that thing we've been doing for centuries that we know no different? Oh, now we're going to pay you. You can come to our schools. You can live in our neighborhoods. You can do this. Of course not. I listened to one interview of a guy, somebody did these interviews in the 1930s of former slaves. One guy said his owner came up to him and his family with a rifle, shotgun or whatever, and said, y'all are free now. Get off my property or I start killing you in 5 minutes. So this family, who knew nothing else, had to go into town, and they asked for shelter, they asked for food, nobody wanted anything to do with them. Nobody, and so when people sit there and go, well, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, black folks did not have bootstraps to pull them up with. 40 acres and a mule was promised. 40 acres and a mule was not got. It was an empty promise. Reparations were paid after the Civil War. Do you know who got them? Slave owners. Slave owners got them. We learned nothing about this in school. Nothing about this in school. And that's, to me, the biggest issue. Black history is American history, and it's an ugly history. But amongst all the ugly history are amazing stories of survival and resilience. Last time I did a Martin Luther King thing was at my mom's club's Martin Luther King presentation. And it was during the Obama time, and I think a lot of folks were patting themselves on the back for electing a black president. And they thought racism was over. Black people knew better. Because when that was happening, it was like, watch what's going to happen. The worst of America is going to come out. And the worst of America has come out. And still, at the end of it, and this happens all the time, there's always a guy who walks up to me and says, what about the Irish? The Irish had it tough. Now, I swear to you, we learned more about the Irish and how, and no Irish need apply, than we learned about black people. And I just have to say, like, did the Irish come over here in the bottom of boats, lied right next to each other like sardines so they could fit the most, with the idea that the people on the boat said, in their head, most of you are not going to survive. And when you're dead or you give birth, we're going to throw a lot of stuff over people over the overboard, and the sharks are going to eat you. So the ones that survive, who make it there, we're going to strip them of their names. We're going to separate the families. We're going to strip them of everything. And anybody who gets out of line, we're going to kill them in front of everybody else so they know not to get out of line. Did that happen to Irish people? And by then, they've walked off somewhere. This guy's crazy. They're going to the police saying there's a crazy black man back there. But what I'm saying is we don't learn anything. And if we did learn it, as hard as it is, we would understand what goes on today. We would understand what police brutality is. We would understand why every black neighborhood is the crappiest neighborhood in the city, because when white people were getting like low-cost mortgages, when the U.S. government wanted people to home ownership, because that's the quickest way to gain wealth, the best way to gain wealth, they weren't giving it to people of color. They weren't giving it to people of color. So white people were getting the first houses in their families able to pass down. And black folks were being forced into worse parts of town. If you go across the country, it's generally the east side of town. It's the worst part of town because the wind blows that way. That's where the trash is. That's where the sewage is. That's where the chemical plants are. So it blows away from the town. And that, I swear to you, every town I've been in, it's pretty much similar all across the country. There's always a story. Someone comes up to me and talks about it. And so it's imperative for us to learn about these stories. And here's the thing for white people. White people need to hear these stories. White people need to hear stories of black, of brown, of Asian accomplishment in the United States. Because here's the problem. When white people know that they didn't do something, they generally think aliens did it. So the pyramids were not built by aliens. And so it's super important for folks to hear these stories. One of my favorite stories is Robert Smalls. South Carolina, born in South Carolina as a slave. He worked on a ship, a Confederate ship, gunship, and everyone would say when he put on, like the crew would go and get drunk. When he would put on the hat, some of his shipmates would say, you kind of look like the captain when you do that. He actually disguised himself as the captain, learned all these codes, these Confederate codes, sailed it out of this harbor, picked up his family, and then sailed it to Union ships. Then he went to D.C. and convinced Abraham Lincoln to use freedmen in the Union Army. Came back down after the war, bought his house, and became a politician, businessman, successful. And his owner, the wife of the owner, he actually let her live and sleep in her former bedroom until she died. She went crazy. A lot of folks went crazy, much like when Obama got elected. When the South lost, a lot of white folks went crazy. But one of the arguments that the South said to the North is, our economy can't be sustained. We have millions of people that, well, they weren't people, that we don't pay. So if we have to start paying people, the economy is going to just go down the tubes. And I swear to you, to this day, we are running on the fumes of that mentality. That's why we underpay so many people. That's why we use like immigrant labor. As much as everyone cries about immigrants, there are people doing jobs that Americans don't do for nothing. It's why slavery was outlawed, except for one reason, for punishment for being in prison. And that's why we imprison millions of people and pay them pennies a day to make car parts, computer parts, lingerie, tons of stuff. If we started paying or banning slave labor or paying people, this whole country would go down the tubes. And that's the argument corporations are always making. Like, we can't pay, real wages, It's crazy. Another one is Josephine Baker. Like, there's a great graphic novel about Josephine Baker. It's like 600 pages in France, where people know her as this Parisian nude dancer, but she was also a spy for the French, and has France's highest honor. It's a great story. It's a wonderful story. And here's the thing: everybody who comes today, there was someone who came before them. I had the pleasure of meeting and interviewing Maury Turner, who was one of the first black syndicated cartoon strips, and he showed me some of his early work. It's all my work. It's like drawn better, like sharper, that he did in the 60s. And I've done this research. I read this article where everybody who was, all the stuff that we're talking about today, if you go back 50 years, if you look in the black newspapers, they're all talking about the same exact thing. And then if you go 50 years before that, it's the same thing. They're talking about the same thing. What he's doing now, he did, 50, 60 years ago. And as much as everybody loves him now, he was one of the most hated guys in America at one point. I've done this slideshow in Chicago. I had these two elderly women sitting in the middle, and they came up to me after, and they said, we sat in those exact seats there 50 years ago, and we listened to Amiri Baraka give the same speech that you're giving right now. We are destined to repeat the same thing, and so many people, and I'm going to hear the excuses, well, I don't benefit from this. Yes, you do. You benefit. You may not, it may not be completely open, but the subtlety of what racism does, and it's honestly, it's a brilliant thing because you can't totally pinpoint it. So if I go to get my house appraised, and someone comes in, sees me there, they'll appraise my house. They leave, I take every evidence of any black people in it and have my white friend, my neighbor, do it, it's gonna get appraised for more. Now, what does that mean? I think it means there's a system in place that allows this stuff to happen, allows this stuff to go on. A person's name, if it remotely sounds ethnic, they have a less of a chance of getting a call back for a job. There's all these different subtle things that happen. And the idea that you don't do it, so you're immune. Here's what I say. I don't litter. I tell my kids not to litter, and they don't litter either. But that doesn't mean we don't volunteer to clean up beaches. We volunteer to clean up forests. There is a system in place that this happens, and we all collectively have to work together to do something about it. And when people say, oh, Martin Luther King, he did it right. He didn't block traffic. He didn't do this. This is a comic that was done about the protests. Martin Luther King was stabbed. Obviously, he was murdered. He was arrested. He went through all this stuff. And when he was killed, he was one of the most hated Americans. Because he had stepped out of his lane. He was doing more than just fighting for black rights. He was fighting for workers' rights, and that's dangerous, So here's what I say to you. You ever notice how anything good is you have to sort of go the extra mile for? And what I'm saying is this. The worst music is the easiest to find. The pop music radio crappiest music. You ever notice, like, in order to find good music, you have to either go left of the dial or you have to do, like, dig in the crates, hip-hop term. You got to seek out the underground bands and stuff. It's same thing with food. It's the same thing. It's the same thing with knowledge and history. Is you're going to get served the pop music of history. Christopher Columbus discovered America. Christopher Columbus we should have a holiday for him. And Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States, he uses Christopher Columbus's own words, and in his own words, he's an asshole. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say, but in his own words, he's a terrible person, you know? And so we need to seek out again, we can eat Cheetos, we can eat McDonald's, because it's all over the place, it's everywhere. The history that we consume, it's all over. You have to look it up, you have to seek it out, you have to find the real healthy stuff. And that's just the way it is, unfortunately. But I think it's the pursuit of that is what, for me, sustains me. It's like, oh, wow, like this information, when I find this. And that's the toughest thing, though, as black and brown folks. You know, we have to undo what's taught to us the first 18 years of our lives, because we're always not the center of things. We're always sort of not anything. And here's the thing. If it wasn't for black people, all the music on the radio would sound like that weird Renaissance thing where, like, people dance around. You could teach black history through music, and everybody would be engaged and psyched about it if you just trace the music. You know, the banjo, that's an African instrument. The slap shot in hockey, that was created by slaves. The descendants of slaves up in Canada who escaped to Canada created their own hockey league, and they created the modern game that we know today. There are so many amazing things. The only reason why cowboys are white, you know, like 60% of the cowboys were black and brown. The reason why they're called boy is because they were black. Most of them were black. The white cowboys were cowpokes. Bill Pickett, the guy who created like every modern rodeo trick, was a black man. We can learn so much, and you know, someone Latino could give you the same speech and tell you all the stuff, the contributions, and in Asian, so many. So, you know, I'm trying to catch up on everything that I have not learned. So, jump forward to 2018. I was lucky enough to make a TV show. And I will say this, doing a comic strip, a daily comic strip for 11 years, even though it's a horrible experience, there is still some cachet to it. And I went to Hollywood with thousands of comic strips to sort of take from. And so I convinced Hulu to give me $27 million to do the first season of Woke. And I managed to get 2 seasons out of it. And it was an amazing experience. This is me on the set of my recreated apartment. And, you know, people say, how did you be so involved in it? Because I know people who got involved in it, and they just kick you out. They buy your... I said to them, if you're going to screw up my stuff, I want to be there. And so, this is where it goes wrong. So I had my hand in everything, every aspect of it. This is on the set in Vancouver. This is our director, Maurice Marable. Lamorne Morris played me. Gunther was played by Blake Anderson, one of my roommates. This is us outside the apartment outside of it in Vancouver. And T. Murph, that was his first role, if you've seen the show. It was his first major role, and he was the breakout star of it. Very funny. This is me. If you've seen the show in episode 7, my character gets punched by a koala. I was the koala, so I got to punch Lamorne in the face. And that's my sister, my twin sister, holding up the head, and my little sister, Les, on the right. And here's the great thing about my sister and I went to, when we were between 4th and 6th grade, we went to a thing called the Major Works program in Malden, Massachusetts. Major Works was this thing where they took the smartest kids in the city and put them in this school. And we did plays and puppet shows and all this creative stuff. So last year, not this Thanksgiving, but the last Thanksgiving, I had pulled out some of the stuff we did in Major Works, and it was wonderful. It was really amazing. And I said, oh, this was the best time. You know, I did all this creative stuff. And it was the smartest kids at the school. My mom said, you know, you were not picked for that school. And I said, what are you talking about? And she said, you know, your sister was picked for that school. And I told them you had to go with her so she wouldn't be lonely. So I was not one of the smartest kids in the city. I was a companion animal for my sister. So, but here's the thing. I thought I was one of the smartest kids in the city. And I'm telling you, because I moved through life with that idea that I'm smart, I accomplished a whole lot that I probably would not have accomplished if people just thought I was stupid, or I would go to jail, or this or that or this. And here's the thing. I just worked with the Schott Foundation for Public Education. They did a study about who, the most effective thing as far as education goes. It's not the equipment that a school has, not the resources. It's not parent involvement. It's the expectations of the teachers. And when you have teachers who probably can't identify with your experience and have this sort of stereotyped idea from the media of what you are, chances are things aren't going to work out for you. And that's why it's so important to have a diverse staff. Because I bonded with my American literature teacher in a way that I didn't bond with any other teacher. And it's so important to include. And I'm talking about that too I'm talking about that with gender, and again, race, like saying the same thing. But this is us on the set, season 2. This is one of my favorite episodes in season 2. Was a parody of One Night in Miami. And so this is Ayana. She actually goes on a mushroom trip. Not that I condone mushroom trips, but she conjures up all these historical black women, and it's a wonderful, it's just a really funny show. And this is my second appearance, and my season 2 appearance, I was the mime, and you know, the saddest thing about it was we found out the mime wanted like $600, $700 to do it. I was like, that's too much, I'm gonna do it myself. And here's the thing. All they had to do was put the makeup on me. Apparently, I needed no costume change. I dress like a low-rent mime. So that's something I discovered. So, so what else? In May, I got to do commencement at Salem State University, my alma mater. I became a doctor, so you must address me as Dr. Chief Knight. But what's great is the school representative who spoke she's an immigrant who lives in Malden, Mass, where I grew up. So it was a nice thing to meet her. And then if you go to Malden, they have an art walk. This is the new mural that got put up there, and I did that last year in May, and it only has one piece of graffiti on it right now, so I'm very excited about that. And here's something that you all can do. So last year, I did something wacky. I bought the URL to blackmugshots.com, and I decided, like, the thing that drives me crazy are mugshots. And if you go on Google and, like, when I search the news, it's always black mugshots all the time. Black people mugshots. Do you see that the most? So much so that I went down to a local news agency and said, you got to stop doing that. Like, the effect that mugshots have, if you read up about them, like, a lot of folks get arrested and they don't get charged or something, like they don't end up going to jail or anything, but these mugshots stay online. So these mugshots stay online. So when you go for a job, you go for an apartment, you go for credit, people look you up all the time. And if they see your mugshot, forget about it. If they see a black mugshot, forget about it. Like, truly forget about it. So I was like, okay, here's what I want to do. I'm going to take a mugshot with my tea mug, and I'm going to try to see if I can game Google's algorithm, how quickly I can do it. So I had other people start taking mugshots. So all these people start sending me mugshots. Now, black people can use any mug, but white people have to use a black mug to make it a black mugshot. And so we started hashtagging black mugshot all over the place. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and it took a month and a half for me to break into Google's algorithm. So if you go to the first page, my black mugshot will come up there. But I want to have that whole Google page, all mugshots, like where people are just holding up basic mugs. So please send me your mugshot, and I swear you won't go on a list somewhere, but maybe you will. But on the site, I have links to, there are countries that ban mugshots. Like in Ireland, you can't, unless you're found guilty of something, then you can have your mugshot up there. But there are companies here in the States that will say, will charge you to erase your mugshot from the web, from the internet, and they'll charge you $1,000. Like, there are companies that do that, and when you try to chase them down, there are all these shell companies and everything. And that's the thing. The prison industrial complex that happens in the United States is so deep, I can't even tell you. I have a book, this sort of newspaper thing that is distributed in prisons, and it's just full of ads of, like, for prisoners to send their money away, and they'll get pictures of pretty girls, and they'll write to you. And of course, it's like, it's probably some sleazy guy just like writing, in real nice handwriting and sending these pictures off to people. But so much exploitation that's going on in there. It's terrible. And I think that this country, 80% of its citizens are considered cannon fodder for probably about 5% of rich people. And it's just like, you're going to go in prisons, you're going to go in low-wage jobs, you're going to, get arrested, you're going to, OD, all this different stuff. And the more that we work for the rights of people, you'll see, like, when you protest, I know when we protest racism, a lot of times people think we're protesting America. And that's close to the truth, which is really kind of weird. Okay, so let me wrap this up. So when I look at this picture, I realize that, one, that the guy in the suit, the black man, is a lawyer, by the way. I don't know if you've read the story about it, but he's a lawyer. Here are a bunch of poor whites fighting and complaining about this busing thing and, going after this guy who has really nothing to do with it. Busing wouldn't exist if the black schools were actually funded well and were decent schools. And we have the silly law like, it's funded by the taxes. It's a perpetual thing because those bad neighborhoods are always going to be low tax wielding, and so they'll never get funded. So we need equity in the schools, not equal the same things, but these underfunded schools need a lot more to just get up to speed. And so, all these folks are fighting, and up in those buildings are the rich people looking down and just They're laughing and counting money. And so I will end with racism in America is like the big pile of dog poop that sits on the grass in front of your apartment building. It's been there for as long as you can remember, and nobody knows how it got there. Nobody wants it there, yet no one wants to clean it up. They say, why should I? I didn't leave it there. Soon you just accept it. You do your best to avoid and or ignore it. It's that pile of poop that allows someone like Trayvon Martin to be murdered while his killer walks, you know. And there's an ending to this, but we all have to clean up the poop, all right? And there's a lot of poop out there. There's a lot of poop. And I'm not saying that we all have to take a bullet like MLK did. MLK, I remember the story about Nicole Nichols, who played Uhura on Star Trek. And she was so humbled because he was a fan and he approached her and she was like, oh my God, like, what do you want me to do? And he said, you know what? You're doing what you need to be doing, because little girls, little black boys and little black girls are looking at you and seeing, wow, you know? And that's the thing. Like, we all have to do our part. And that could be just listening. It could be just talking to somebody, you know? I swear to you, if you talk to a black person, 65 or older, for 10 minutes, you will learn more about black history than you've ever learned in any school. Talk to them. Open your door. If you are a business owner, consider people of color, because it's so much harder for folks. It's statistically, a white man with a record has a better chance of getting a job than a black man with a college degree. And we need police officers to consider what happens when you arrest a black man, because it's done. It's done when you do that. And so we need people to understand that. And the exploitation, I live in UNC, Chapel Hill, and they're starting to pay players a little bit, but that is the biggest. I mean, you look at NCAA is $1 billion industry. You have a coach that is getting paid $10 million. And if you buy a sandwich for one of these players, they'll lose their scholarship. Meanwhile, the science major can teach science all they want while they're in school. You can't tell me that that's, not tainted with racism, I thank you for having this difficult conversation, because I think a lot of times people bring me in, it's like, let's celebrate, MLK, blah, blah, blah. But we have a long, long way to go. And when people say, get over it, was a long time ago, I say, Jesus was a long time ago, and nobody has gotten over that. So don't come to me with that. Trauma carries on through generations. We know that with the victims of the Holocaust. It carries through generations. What trauma is America carrying? With black folks? With indigenous folks? With white people? We need to address it. And that's the only way we can move forward. So again, I thank you, and I appreciate you inviting me. Thank you. So I know I went long. I know if you guys want to ask some questions now, that would be wonderful. But I do have books and prints here, and I know we're going to have a discussion here. Maybe I don't know. What's the best way to do it? Should we move forward? Does
Would you like
questions?
Q&A now, or would you like a break?
He wants to buy a book. But are there any questions? Like, it'd be great to have some questions right now.
I will bring the microphone to you if you have a question. Raise a hand.
Okay. Oh, there's some. The person farthest back, all the way back there. Excellent.
Question back here? I'll hold it for you. It easily goes off.
I just wanted to know if all your work is hand-drawn, or is there software that you use for your comics?
I am totally old school. I draw everything by hand with paper, but then I scan it and I clean it up and color it in Photoshop. But all my peers are on Wacom tablets and all these other tablets, but I am still drawing by hand. And I think it's therapeutic. It's really fun to do. I love the simplicity of, I feel like cartooning is like the oldest medium ever. Like hieroglyphics are cartooning, cave paintings are cartooning, and just having a pencil and a piece of paper, you know, it's, oh, I forgot to follow up on the pencil. So, here's the metaphor. So, this pencil. So, like I said, it takes way longer to fix something than it is to break something, and we took, I don't know, 250 years, 260 years of breaking people, and then add Jim Crow, and you're still breaking people. Black people have been enslaved longer than they have been free. So this idea that we had civil rights, affirmative action, and a black president is going to wipe out this is crazy, It's going to take twice as long, at least, to fix what's gone on. And the first thing we have to do is acknowledge that. You know, Reconstruction went for about 10 years. Like they were like, oh, you know, everything's fixed now. And then, of course, everything went, you know, black codes, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Rosewood. Like, I have people come up to me and go, I know this has nothing to do with your question, but I had a guy walk up to me and go, well, how come black people didn't, you know, just put communities together? And I said, have you ever heard of Tulsa, Oklahoma? Have you ever heard of Rosewood? Have you, you know, and of course he hasn't. And it's just like, come to me when you've done, you know, when you learn something. You don't come to me with these arguments anymore, because it's all out there. You can see it. And so I urge people to really look into it and just really understand it's all there. You gotta reach for it. It's gotta be, again, like decent food. You know, just don't go to McDonald's. We don't, right? Right? It's okay to go to Dunkies once in a while, but
Any other questions? I see a hand raised here. I'll hold it for you because it goes off.
Okay. Hi, thank you so much. I was wondering, I was introduced to you from Woke, so I was wondering and then I had to go backwards to look at your older comics, and now I have those at home, and I'm having to hide them from my 7 and 9-year-old for the time being, but I wanted to ask you about that too later. I was wondering what was next, if there was another big thing, or what your next thing is.
Well, I mean, I will continue to, I'm still doing my comic strips and still producing books, and my nightlife work, my daily strips are kid-friendly, so those are the ones, yeah, my nightlife books. But and Jake the Fake too. I do a illustrated book series called Jake the Fake. It's for tweens. But the next thing I'm working on I'm working up 2 pitches for some shows, and headed back to LA to pitch those shows. So that's going on, and there's a book project that I've been working on for many years that I'm going to be finishing up, and yeah, I'll just continue to do strips, you know, continue to do the work. I really want to focus on like prisons and just abolishing this idea. We are the cruelest country when it comes to prisoners and putting people in solitary confinement. 80% of the people at Rikers Island have not been convicted of anything, you know? And it's just like, you know, Khalif Browder is really like this kid was arrested at 15 for stealing a backpack, did not steal it. And he was in there for like 2 years, I think. I can't remember how long he was a child in this prison. And he came out and he killed himself. Like, and it happens so often. And we only see the ones that get written about. But for everyone we see written about, thousands. It happens all the time. It's crazy. And I will say this. This past year, 2022, police killed more people on record than they've ever done. The George Floyd protests did nothing. Absolutely nothing. If anything, now people are, politicians are like, we need more police. We don't need more police. We do not. Violence, you know, there's been an uptick recently, but it's still as low as it was than in the 60s. It's not anywhere near it was in the 90s. And I consider the 90s happy times, you know? And there are so many, I have so many things to say about police. And but I will say this. If you want to do something about police brutality, when something happens and the family sues, the money should come out of police pensions. The moment it comes from them that they have to pay and not us, they're going to start policing themselves. I want good police to be safer than bad police, because right now bad police get protected more than good police do. And I'm talking about good police are the police who will out the bad police, you know? And I would say one out of every 4 police shouldn't be a policeman. And all of you, watch TV. Every commercial, if it's not drugs, it's a police procedural. And, you know, everybody's solving crime. They don't, you know, they're outgunned. Sometimes they have to bend the rules. You know, statistically, how much police solve crimes? 8%. 8% of crimes. And if you think about your interaction with police, what they solved the last 3 times you've done something with police, you tell me what they solved. Nothing. And I have police in my family. That's I always say that because people will say, I have black people in my family. I have black people in my family. I have black people in my family. But here's the thing. I want to say this. You know, people say this, like, you know, I'm not racist. My son is married to a black woman. You wouldn't, you know, if some guy walked up to you and said, I'm not sexist. My mom's a woman. I'm not sexist. I'm married to a woman. You wouldn't believe it, right? So don't say, oh, I know black people. You know, I can't be racist. I know black people. Like, it's this, we got to stop saying silly things and have real conversations. So, sorry. Is there another question? I saw someone with their hand up. Yes.
Yes. I'll hold it for you because it goes off easily.
Not really a question. I just want to underscore the story that you told that I will repeat at home, which is the story of your sister and you going to that special program and the impact of your self-concept of being that capable carried you as far as it has.
Totally.
And what that would mean multiplied by the number of kids of color who are in schools with getting a very different message.
Yeah.
So I thank you for that.
Thank you. It's a huge thing. It's a huge thing. It really is.
All right, I think we should probably take a break at
Okay.
this point. You'll have a chance to ask Keith more questions in the second half when he joins the panel.
Yeah.
So let's have about a 10, 15-minute break for some refreshments and chat.
Coffee and cake, and then I have prints and books up here. So please come on up.
And those are very tasty, I can tell you.
And I take credit cards and give them back.
Moderator, and you'll have a chance to ask them and Keith more questions. And if you haven't been able to purchase some of Keith's artwork, you may do so after the event. So if the store will be open afterwards as well. If you could please make your way back to your seats. I hope that you've been able to have some good refreshments out back and some good visits with people. We're absolutely thrilled to have such a wonderful crowd here today. Now it's on. All you have to do is clip it on. Okay. All right. And Natalie?
Natalie was just here.
Yeah.
Natalie?
All right. You want to clip this on and make... Okay, you're on now. So whatever you say. Thank you, everybody, for settling in. If you still have something delicious in your hand, you can bring it with you to your seat. In this second half, we have the opportunity for several people to also express their experience and have a discussion with Keith about his life and his work. And the moderator for this part of the segment is Tony Waldron. Among many things you can see in the program, she is the education director at the Royal House and Slavery Museum in Medford, Massachusetts. If you're not familiar with the Royal House, go on their website. You will find an extraordinary history. It is a very beautiful building to go visit, physically extremely beautiful. But it's one of the few places in New England where you can also see the slave quarters and where the story of how this wealthy family kept slaves for a very long time and the interaction between the family and the descendants of those slaves is really fascinating history. So Tony, I'm going to hand over to you and to introduce the panel and to take over.
Welcome, everybody. It's quiet out there. Did you guys eat too much cake? Well, thank you and welcome. Thank you for that introduction. I'd like to begin just thanking the UU Church and the Gloucester Meetinghouse Foundation, all of our community organizers, partners, of course, our wonderful panelists representing the NAACP and the Gloucester Racial Justice Team. You already have familiarized yourself with Mr. Keith Knight. I would just like to say thank you. It is my practice to position myself in a place and a space. So with that being said, I know you have heard about the importance of land acknowledgements, but I would like to acknowledge myself as a brown settler here on these traditional and ancestral lands that were once home and continue to be home to the Pawtucket people and their indigenous cousins. Those are the Nipmuc, the Massachusetts tribe, the Pennacook, and the Wampanoag tribes. It's really important to recognize the people who have come before us, who have survived, who have practiced resilience and remain here. So that's our indigenous brothers and sisters, but also those who were enslaved here and built the wealth not only of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, but also these United States. So I would like to just start with that. So again, thank you. So my role as moderator, if you want to know the truth, they asked me to be a panelist. I said, you guys, I think I should be a moderator. I think I'm better at asking questions than answering them. So here I am with you today, and I'm going to maybe at times give a little bit of my own experience here as a resident of Gloucester. You may be residents of Gloucester or Rockport, or you may have come from North Carolina and farther, but apparently I am still just a guest, even though I'm going to celebrate 10 years of living here next year. So as a guest of Gloucester, I just want to say, we all know what kind of community we live in. It's very small, tight-knit, and in that vein, I just want to kind of deformalize this a little bit. I want to shake it out. We're just a community having a conversation, right? So maybe that's for me, maybe that's for you, but I would like everyone to treat our guests here also with that same respect. So when we're kind of engaging with the panel, making sure we're practicing that humility and that grace that you show, at least in my home training, that you show a guest, okay? So I'm going to jump in with just a question, and the questions I formulated today, I formulated with, to be quite honest, Keith in mind, but they also lent themselves to our panelists and the larger community. So in that vein, I hope that, if it doesn't feel fully relevant, you'll still just kind of offer your thoughts and opinions. So I was thinking a lot about your work, Keith, because I was a fan, and I had just 3 weeks ago been driving back from Medford listening to you on the radio. You were giving an interview on I don't even know if it was NPR or whatever, but I was surprised when I heard you were coming, because I was how interesting. I was just listening to you on the radio. But what I love about your work is that it uses humor and levity. So in my own work as an anti-racist educator, I do a lot of guidelines and guiding principles. We call them classroom norms, guiding principles. You may be familiar with the concept. I always say there's room for levity. That is one I often add in, because it's really hard when you're having difficult conversations. Everybody gets really tense, and all of a sudden people are afraid they're going to say the wrong thing, so nobody says anything, right? So I think that's one of the benefits of levity, but I was really curious with that in mind, how you speak to the tension that might exist in your work when you're using a subversive tool like humor or levity to address serious and painful truth. Specifically, when you are using that tool, in a predominantly white space, a predominantly white institution. Is there a danger that humor can act as an entry point for certain white familiarity, right? Are you laughing with me? At me? I'm just wondering if you would speak to that, and if that was something that ever came up as a consideration.
Oh, yeah, it's interesting, because I feel like in 2016, and the summer of 2016, I put out a book called Make America Hate Again, and it was something that I thought was going to be just let me get this out before the election, and it would just disappear. And on the cover of it, I had this pickup truck with a bumper sticker that said Trump, yes we Klan, on the bottom of it. And I made stickers out of it, and I sold stickers. But when he got in, I reprinted it's my biggest selling think book, but at some point I just stopped selling those stickers, because I think at some point I think the people, it went from a funny thing to, I think people who wanted them were like, yeah, I am with the Klan. Here, take this. So I don't sell them on my site anymore. The stickers, I still sell the book, but that was an interesting moment. But it reminds me of I'm not going to compare myself to Dave Chappelle, but I remember Dave Chappelle saying at some point, he started seeing people laughing in a way that he wasn't comfortable with, and that's why he just took off to Africa, because it's just but that's what happens I mean, when you put your art out there, you don't know how it's going to be taken. You don't know how it's going to develop and how it's going to change. I think an episode that speaks to that is the Black People for Rent episode in season 1 of the show. That was based on a real thing that I did, which is I hung up posters in formerly black neighborhoods that were being gentrified in San Francisco, and I put up Black People for Rent, willing to stand around your, instantly add diversity to your, event or whatever. But I put my real number on there to my office, and it just went to a generic voicemail. And I got people who called up who got the joke. They were like, "Oh my God, this is great." Then I got racists who called, and it was like, "Oh yeah, I want a basketball player," blah blah blah. I got crying liberal people going, "What is this? Why are you doing this?" Like just crying into the phone. Then I got inquiries from press, and I never answered them. But the most calls, and then I got calls that were from companies that, can you call us back with this? Like, I wasn't sure if they were really inquiring about it, but the calls I got the most were from Black people asking for jobs, like looking for work. And that, I just knew when I heard that, I was like, oh my God, this is like something more than a comic strip. Like, this is something I gotta, if I ever have the chance to create something more, I will do it. So I was so happy to have the show to be able to do something about it. But the version that I wanted to do is so much better than what ended up on the screen. Like, it was way sharper, but that's Hollywood.
Right. Okay, I'm gonna move.
Well, that was pretty direct to Keith. So
Okay.
we, I mean, we, all right. We are living in Gloucester in a community where it's a predominantly white space, most places, most of the time. And we find that building networks with people, building relationships, and meeting people respectfully where they're at is the way for us all to learn together. And we've done a lot of networking. We've built, we have people calling us, Facebooking us when they see things, because they know we're going to go and talk to the people who they observed a microaggression. And because we have such a good network, people listen to us, and we've been able to affect some change, both in perception and in policy, which the city of Gloucester, by the way, has been really responsive to changing policy around HRs, where we've been focusing on hiring and training staff. But watching your work and the humors, even watching the TV show ahead of time, we are deathly serious too much. We try to be light, and we have people in our group that are wonderfully positive and light, but I'm thinking a lot about how can we meet more people face to face with more humor. So, but I think it's delicate when you're the white people. I mean, we have a mixed group, but some of us feel like it's very important to show our respect, and we're kind of good straight men, maybe. Can we be straight men?
I mean, Black folks have traditionally used humor because
how could you not?
There's a fine line between humor and tragedy. It's like, and that's how we get through a lot of the stuff that we get through, because you can't cry all the time. No. And a lot of times it's a very awkward and odd situation. But yeah, it's an interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. Is there a Black neighborhood in Gloucester? Is there?
There's a couple of us.
Yeah, I mean, is there like a?
There are more than 2,000 Black people in Gloucester who self-identify that way, and when I tell that to people, it's a population of 30,000, and people go, no. White people say, no.
There is, yeah, well, yeah, that's,
So,
that's
but
a pretty huge thing.
I don't know of a particular, I mean, downtown, some of the poorer neighborhoods sometimes, but it's pretty spread out.
Yeah, they really can't be an east side if you're on the coast, right? That's like in the water.
Maybe they're on a boat somewhere.
There you
you
go.
go, 'cause that's the
Probably.
east side.
Hopefully not.
And did you have anything you wanted to answer?
Not really. I mean, I think it's answered. Just I saw that episode, and I that's how the episode hit me, is when the black guy, you know, the actor was listening to the, hey, can I get a job? He was just like, and I remember thinking, did that really happen? Like, did Keith Knight really do that?
Yeah, it was wild, but it was just on the phone. But yeah, the episode that I wanted to do was Clovis, you know, early on says, like, we got to do this, like, you know, let's just do one. Let's just answer one of these calls. You know, it's already set up, and so they go to this house, and there's a woman, an elderly black woman on her deathbed, and her daughter's there, and it's just like, you know, my mom grew up here, and the whole neighborhood's been gentrified, and you know, she just wants to be surrounded by black folks before she dies, and so they're there, and it's a very solemn, you know, and she's like, thank you, and they leave, and Keith is just like, oh my God, like, and Clovis is like, see, like, this is like, you know, this is something that, and so they go into business as doing black people for rent. And so they start auditioning black people to play black people, and they start rejecting black people, going, we already have this black person. And it becomes this whole weird black people judging black people. You're not black enough. Oh, you're too black, you know. And so the rejected black people get mad and start their own black people for rent. And in the end, they both get hired. They both get hired for this one gig, and they show up together in the parking lot and like, wait, and they start to they're about to get to fisticuffs, and then Keith notices one of the people behind the guys is the lady that was on her deathbed. And it turns out Clovis had hired the woman to play the sick lady, and so they start fighting. And then white people call the police, and it ends like that. So that was the episode I wanted to do.
Good.
But
Yeah.
it didn't work out very well.
Too edgy.
Oh dear.
Well, thank you. I hear in the comments, you know, or in these first remarks, a question of, you know, black visibility. And I think it kind of was thread through even your own storytelling of, you know, when we're looking and when we're not. And one of the themes you write and draw about is obviously police brutality. And one of the kind of calls for myself in my anti-racist and justice work was uplifting black joy, because it's easy for us to center our attention on our efforts on the violence enacted on black and brown bodies, right? State sanctioned or otherwise, but it seems to be a harder shift for people when we're looking at things that bring joy, right? So visibility. So I was wondering if anybody felt like they could talk to that piece, right? That tension of when white people feel like they can speak to the issues of oppression or violence against black people versus recognizing black people have always been here since the beginning of the history of this country and before, actually. And black history is American history, right? So we're always trying to section out blackness, which is today, it's going to be Black History Month in February. You know, we're sectioning out Martin Luther King Jr.'s day, but really, black people, even if the population is 2,000 or otherwise, when we joke and say, where are they, right? They're here. The same as indigenous people have always been here, continue to be here, and when we look around and we see the things that have been built, we know that they've always been here. When we go through the museum and we look at the silver on display or the furniture that we have preserved from the 17th, 18th centuries, I personally wonder, well, who polished that? Who made it such that it would be able to withstand time and be in this museum? who crafted this jacket that is now encased in a glass case. So I'm really interested in the tensions between when we show up around visibility for the Black experience. If I would like to talk to that.
Well, that's a lot of what we've been finding arises in these conversations. We're working with a historic New England about some of these very issues around Beauport, Sleeper McCann House, where there are slavery-related items with no interpretation. And we've got people researching. There's a hanging in the dining room. Why? But it could be a good learning experience if somebody said something, is a deed for a slave, framed as like a decoration. And, you know, some children see it and they're like, especially Black children, we've gotten feedback, they see it and then the other kids tease them because they make that connection that these people are less than. And so, Historic New England is meeting with us right in this room in a couple weeks. They're sending 5 people. That's how, you know, so people are, how to say it, it's a good time for people to talk about how we tell the story of America. People are starting to try to be, really look at it, learn the history, and learn how to tell the story. So it's a creative time right now.
Yeah, you know, I would, and I feel like Black people, anybody can speak to it like this. I like to reframe so many different things. You know, it's always so awkward tiptoeing around slavery and everything, but I look at it this way. Those who survived the Middle Passage are the strongest, most resilient people that arrived here on these shores. I am a descendant of some of the strongest, most resilient people. And you can say that. Anybody can say this.
That's right.
You children, Black children, are the strongest. You have survived crazy amounts of oppression. And the fact that you're able to be here, what they went through, speaks to how much you can accomplish.
That's age appropriate to every kid.
Yeah. And that's it. That's you know, so many people say that Barack Obama is a Black accomplishment, his election. And honestly, it's a white accomplishment because there have been plenty of Black people who qualified to be the president in the past, but white people would never vote for that. And so I think it's a white accomplishment that there were, one of the comics I did a comic about this canvasser who was going around, I think outside of Philadelphia, and it was like, you know, I'm looking to see who you're going to vote for. And the person said, you know, who are we voting for, honey? Oh, we're voting for the N-word. Like they screamed out, totally obnoxious, racist, but they were voting for him because they were voting for the best person qualified, you know?
Wow.
And that's the moment I knew he was going to win in 2008. It was like, oh, this person's going to vote for it. And so I think it's a matter of rethinking and understanding that, like, there are so many things out there that you can point to, you know, that Black people just did but the shoes on your feet right now, you know, like, I don't know if you know about sneaker culture, but it's crazy. And that is a Black thing. Like, all the music you hear on the radio is so influenced by hip hop, by Black music. I mean, country music sounds like hip hop music now. And there are so many things out there. Potato chips were created by a Black cook. White people come in and say, oh, you gotta, you know, you're not making the potatoes thin enough. Make it, and he was like, oh, you want me to make thin potatoes? I'll make them thin potatoes. And cut them so thin that it created the potato chip, and everyone loved it. It was like the spot to go. And these are funny stories that can be shared with people, and just you gotta be able to have people, everybody, whether it's one kid in the corner, feel proud and have something that they can, say, oh, that's really interesting. Let me look into that. Let me check that out. Let me find this person and read about this thing or whatever. It's there. We just we just have to think differently. It can't be all tiptoed and all this stuff. It's like knowing cancer. If your family has cancer in the family, it's not a great thing to know about, but you should know about it so you can be aware of it and be ready to address it.
And us white people would rather die a generation ago than tell anyone in their family they had cancer. So just saying, it goes across, we got a long ways to go on that.
Well, yeah.
At least in New England, right?
The biggest indication is public pools. White people would have, there were public pools all across this country. White people would rather close down the public pools than share a public pool with a person of color. And sadly,
I have to say, the biggest indication is desegregation of schools.
Yeah.
Because they shut down schools in the South for a whole year, right? Like, rather than integrate. Lost years of learning. That was generations of lost learning.
And think about all the white teachers that didn't want to teach black kids. And you think about, when you start to think about that, you think about all the doctors that don't want to treat black people and all the contractors who don't want to work for black people in the South. I have some friends of mine. My kid takes African drumming from this one guy who got a house with his wife. It was an as-is house, and he said, I was just talking to him recently, and he's like, I had these contractors, and they do good work, but when they came and worked on it, they didn't do good work. And it's just like, you don't realize how much a person of color has to consider. Does this white person actually value me? Or like, do they care? Like, that is something white people never have to worry about. Like, never. And I'm not saying that you guys don't have it tough, but that's one thing you never have to worry about. It's never, because I've had people talk to me and say, oh, I felt I was on the bus once and I was the only white person there. And so I knew what it was like to be a minority. And I was like, no, you don't. You don't. You'd have to grow up seeing nothing about you on TV, nothing about you in newspapers, learning nothing and hearing the opposite of Billy Joel, whatever it is, like all the time. Like, I think Billy Joel's okay, but he doesn't deserve to be played every day. Like Al Green deserves just as much airplay as Billy Joel.
He does.
So, like, and you, like, if you're on a bus, white person on a bus, you know that if the cops stop the bus, you're going to be the most protected person on that bus. Like, they are not, there's nothing. So the idea that you know what it's like to be a minority, you don't. You don't at all, because there is this, one of the things that I had an issue with with Hulu, with the executives was, and not the guys who got the show going, because they were great, but I had questions about, so why does in the pilot that Keith, when he gets mugged, it's like not as scary as the police? And I said because the police it's legal for them to just murder him right there, and so he feels a lot more frightened by that situation than this guy who kind of looks like him robbing him in the night. And they were like, well, can he point a gun at him or something? And I'm like, no, I don't want that. Like, one of the things I said is I don't want any black people pointing guns at anybody. And So the compromise was he lifts the thing
Lifts the
and his
shirt,
gun's in the thing.
Which
but-
was, by the way, one of the funniest scenes, that little piece for me. I loved that, because I was like, I love that mugger.
Yeah. And, you know, if we got a season 3, this is the thing that would happen in season 3, which is Gunther gets jury duty. So he gets jury duty, and of course he throws out the jury duty sheet, and Keith finds it in the trash. They're like, what are you doing? Like, you got to do jury duty. And he's like, I don't know how to do jury duty. And so him and Ayanna say, like, listen, we get thrown off the jury all the time. Like, black people, if any black people, you have to, like, lie and say, oh, yeah, you know, I'll put black people in jail. Like, you have to convince a lawyer to keep you on the jury. I always used to get thrown off juries. So he's like, you got to go. You could prevent a black man from going up the river. He's like, so they dress him up, and then, you know, he goes, and he's never usually out in the morning. And he goes and does it, and he comes home. He's like, oh my God, like, this is great. You guys were right. Like, it's like they want to send this guy up the river. You're like, you know, I'm the jury foreman now. Like, I'm trying to protect him, blah, blah, blah. And so then it finally comes down to when they're going to do the verdict. He's like, come on in. You guys should come in for the verdict. So Keith and Ayanna go in there. And what happens is, it turns out it's the guy that mugged him from the from the pilot. And so Keith is like, you know, when they say he's innocent, you know, Keith is like, no, he's guilty. He's guilty. So that's one
funny.
of the, you know.
And I obviously would love, Natalie, if you have like anything to add at this point about that tension between visibility, joy, and pain of the Black experience, especially in our predominantly white community.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously can't speak to the pain and joys of the Black experience, but, you know, there is definite tension in the work. And honestly, I have never laughed so hard with some of the jokes that come out of this work. Like, it is just everything you described. It's awkward. You, as like, I mean, we went to the convention last year, and I was the only white then president. I'm now vice president. We have a new president, Ken-Ann McKenzie. And actually, if it's okay, I'd love to point out our new other vice president, Kyle Marsh, who's in the audience. Yeah. And and also our treasurer, Martha Brennan. She's our founding treasurer, and Heather. I think that's Heather. Yes, it is. Yeah, she's our new education chair. You know, I'll say this. When we started the branch in 2020, after George Floyd, there was a lot of white people that just couldn't say didn't see what they saw. And it was genuine, right? We all kind of thought, we didn't see how segregated life was, I think. Or maybe we didn't want to see it. That's a whole other discussion. But we jumped up after George Floyd. That's what happened. And when we saw that, at the time, I saw a bunch of white people that were up and immediately called Colors of Change, Black Lives Matter, NAACP, and said, I can show you the email. It was, there's a lot of white people jumping up. We don't have any people of color leading this. We need to lean into you because this is a momentum we have to take advantage of, right? But we need Black leadership. And Juan Cofield, president of NEAC, New England Area Conference of the NAACP, he's a national board member, called me the next day, and it was on. And so what I'll say is something that he says, and it's just important. Racism is not a Black problem. It's an American problem. And
that's just what you said.
You know, like, it is so true, right? Because you can have all the Black people doing all the work all day long, all centuries long, and unless the white people get up out of their comfort zone and get into that work with them and feel uncomfortable doing the work, feel uncomfortable, feel awkward, be brave enough to make a mistake, say the wrong thing, whatever it is, be called out on a microaggression, we're never going to make progress. And so, you know, what I'll say is the work is tension. Tension is the work. Right.
Yep.
Okay? And I think everybody here that's spending the day in this forum knows this, right? Because you want to be uncomfortable. You want to be in that comfort. It's like, ask yourselves, what what is uncomfortable to me right now, right? Like, what's uncomfortable? I'll tell you, I'm gonna offer something that was a tension point for me. In my local community, I live in Wenham, I'm organizing a business association networking, okay? We have a tiny bunch of Black and brown owners in Hamilton and Wenham, maybe 4, maybe 5, right? And I thought, oh, I'm in a position of power where I'm creating a networking event for businesses, right? And I have to invite everybody. You know what I did? I called the Black owners. I called the brown owners. Tomorrow I'm going to the convenience store owned by the brown owner, and I am going to say, I want you to come to this. This is really important. Would love to. I'm not saying, oh, I want to rent a Black person. What I'm saying is, what's comfortable for me is to send out the email to all the emails I have, right? It's easy for me to say, oh, I'm busy, I'm a mom, I have a full-time job, I do volunteer work, I don't need to do that. If they want to come, they can come. Or I could literally go into my place of discomfort and I can call Paul, the Black carpenter, who's awesome, and say, hey, Paul, listen, I know you don't like to go to these things, but I really think you should come. He's coming.
Right.
And you know what? That's the work.
Yeah.
Because when he comes, I am going to introduce him to people I know, right? I'm not going to like be in my comfort zone, right? This is all work. It's like, I know it sounds boring and cheesy, but like, that's the work. I'm not a genius. I'm just somebody that's leaning into the work, right? It's tension for everyone, right? It's and it's tension for Black. It's tension for you to be there, to be like, hey, let's talk about this, white people,
I'm tense.
you know? Like, I mean.
No, but it's because they went too hard yesterday at the Beverly Nail Spa right here.
But to your point, and to your point, like when you go to the gym, you know you got to break a sweat. You got to create tension. That's how you get stronger. So you have to do that stuff. And I just want to talk quickly about Black Joy. One of the things that we talk about in season 2, the episode with where Ayanna has the parody of One Night in Miami. There's a scene where they're watching Black Trauma 5 because there was a series of all these shows that were coming out where it's just Black people suffering.
Yeah.
And like it's way too much of it. We can't just have just a bunch of, oh, let's show
13 years a slave.
Yeah, 13 years a slave. We can't have. I don't want to see Fred Hampton being murdered again and all these different things. But yeah, the idea of Black joy, and I just think about. I brought my kids we homeschool, so we go to things when nobody's there. And we went to a trampoline place. And in this trampoline place were 3 Black kids, probably 14, 15 years old. And they're just jumping. And they're jumping, having the time of their lives. I guarantee you most people would be scared to death of these kids if they were walking down their street in their neighborhood. And here were these guys just jumping and having a great time. And I swear to you, I was almost in tears just watching them because they never get to feel good because they're worried about being followed in stores. They're worried about cops. They're worried about, if someone isn't open enough to give them a job, they're, it's either athlete or some sort of entertainment thing. And it's so hard, and people need to understand that. And white people need to understand that. They need to give, reach out and say, like, let's give somebody a chance, know? And that's a huge thing.
The Black people in our group have been working with the library to have an all Gloucester read this summer, and they're looking for a book with that theme of, be it a novel or whatever, in Black joy. And of course, we're building other networks of people working with us on that still. But if you have any good books to recommend, that would be great.
I will give you a list of books.
Thank you.
But if anyone wants to see Black joy, this in the North Shore, every year at Salem Willows has a church picnic.
Yes.
Where Black folks, you'll see more Black people there than you'll ever see in your life. And we had a little bit of a reunion last summer, just my family and some of my sleazy college friends. And it was just such a joy to see my sleazy college friends interacting with my family and at Salem Willows. But, you know, that is here. But also, if you haven't been to the museum in D.C., the Black History Museum in D.C., if you want to see Black Joy, if you go there, it's just because it's something that of such high quality that's centered in Blackness. Everything about it. You go down to the food downstairs, and they have like soul food, barbecue, like all this difference. Every part of it. The mothership from Parliament Funkadelic is upstairs. There's all this stuff that will just, and it breaks all the, you know, all the different fairy tales that, you know, who's, I'm spaced out on, who's,
You've been working for
who's
a
the
while.
first black baseball player that everyone talks about? You know, I love Jackie. He isn't the first professional baseball player that was black. Ezra Clay, I'm spacing on his name now.
Listen, I would help, but I'm from England, and that is not our national pastime.
Yeah. Anyway, late 1800s, there were black professional ball players, and it wasn't till after Reconstruction they said, like, let's ban black people from everything. And so it got to the point where, you know, they were like, we're leaving money on the table if we don't have black people playing. And part of the Red Sox curse, they say it's Babe Ruth, but no, it isn't just that. The owner of the Red Sox vowed never to have a black player. He had a chance to have Jackie Robinson. He had a chance to have all these great players, but he didn't have it. That's part of the curse. And I will say this, the Bruins had a black player before the Red Sox had a black player, 1 year before. And so that just goes to show you why that street isn't named after that clown anymore. So, and believe me, I'm a big Red Sox fan. So, yeah, there you go.
So there's a lot of nuggets you just offered there for me to. I'm seeing many paths to take, and I'm conflicted because I'm like, I want to go there, I want to go here, but I'm going to go where I think we need to go, because you speak about the tension, right? The tension of the work. You've also added in, like, it's about centering different people. I loved you using that word, Keith, because I use that word a lot about who are we centering in the classroom, in the narrative, in our history retelling. And I notice, especially in our community where we are predominantly white, you know, after 2020, there was this kind of awakening, you know, the woke became awakened. And we were trying to see who was here and reach across the aisle and find, you know, those people who had maybe been made invisible. And in such, there were these conversations, but these conversations still very much were framed within a white-centric narrative, right? So even I was asked this question recently in an interview, like, how would you diversify the people who show up and who come to this event? I said, well, we're going to turn the music up louder, and we're not going to worry about what time this event starts, right? Because if you're changing how you want to interact with a group who is culturally different than you, you have to shift the frames. You can't, I've moved away from the word inclusion, and I invite us to belong, right? So when you are heading an organization who's trying to do this justice work, just as the Gloucester Racial Justice Team or the NAACP is, but you're still noticing we're predominantly white and we're in a predominantly white community, what is the ask of the white folk leading that when you're really speaking to diversifying and interacting with people who may be different than you, who may understand communication differently? The way you even formulate an email may be completely misconstrued. So what is the charge for, you know, the white community members who are trying to do this work in tension with grace? I don't know if you could speak to that a little bit.
I can definitely respond to that. I think, you know, it's funny because this is the theme of where I'm at personally with, like, okay, what do we do with, where do we go from here, right? Like, we are living in a majority homogenized region, like a lot of places in the country, and where do we go from here? We all have agreed racism is bad and we want to eliminate it. Okay, now what, right? I do believe, and it's like a little bit Buddhist, right? It's like, you know, there's corporate realm, there's your personal family, friend realm, and then there's the volunteer realm of things that you're passionate about. And you lead with a little bit more passion in this space because it's personal work. And for whatever reason, right? Like I have no idea why I got woke, right? To use your, series name. But like, you don't choose it. You just are, and you have to accept your charge, right? Like, and I think that part of the work, once you're at the table doing it, with all the things we talked about, is you really have a responsibility to be like almost super conscious of what you're bringing to the table, right? Because if you're looking to break down 400 years of super tense cultural differences, which is what they are, they're loaded like, I've been in conversations with Black women, I can feel the 400 years of distrust coming my way, and I can feel my microaggressions busting out. Like, it's so crazy. And but you have to, part of the work is your own internal work, right? Like, it's like, be balanced, be conscious of what is happening. Don't be too guilty if this is coming your way. Feel it, put yourself beside it. Be strong enough to be in that space, because you're building the stitch that will build upon itself. We are doing work for the first time in this region, really. We're breaking it down, we're building it back up, be the stitch. And frankly, that's not just white people, it's Black people too, because we have to meet together, And that's hard, that's really hard for a white person to be like, hey, Black people, we need you at the table. But we need the Black people at the table, we need to be at the table, and then we all have to experience that tension together, and regardless of what the crappy history is, we have to start anew together, right? And I think that is so hard. Like, it's hard for everybody, and making time and space, not just on MLK Day, but like, I don't know about, I know it's the choir here, right? We all wake up, and frankly, how many times do you guys think about racism every day, right? Like, it's like, you can't not think about it. So I don't even know what it's like to be Black in America, right? I can only try to take my energies and be part of the solution at this point, right? We talk about, just a little segue, your penchant for criminal justice, right? We have 2020, 2021, at the end of 21, belaboringly, we had a Massachusetts police reform bill passed that was like amazing, happy clappy. Nothing has been done. The committee has not even been formed, right? This is really separating men from the boys' work, because yes, yay, we're all Black Lives Matter, but guess what? We have a lot of work to do, so we need all hands on deck. It's internal work, it's actually like the work, it's writing letters to politicians, it's showing up at meetings, it's being uncomfortable to make friends with people that didn't grow up like you or are not in the same socioeconomic bandwidth as you. All that is part of like your duty, right, as a human being here.
And it's showing up. I mean, discomfort. Some of us like discomfort, and some of us like to learn, and we're all in the thick of it. But I'll tell you, showing up for meeting after meeting after meeting, year after year. I mean, I'm by far the oldest person up here. I've been showing up to meetings for 50 effing years. But I've worked with people who 50 years ago were working on police reform community committees. And it wasn't until the white people joined them, because they were in a minority, that they got them. So yes, but then you have to go to another 400 meetings to make sure they actually do what was set up or voted on or whatever. Well, so what I'm saying is, discomfort is different for different people. For me, it's like, oh, I have to go to another meeting. I'm really would like to retire from that, but you can't. Yeah. So for some people, it's having that conversation in the first place. And the truth is, you have to change as a human being. To change the culture, we're changing the story, but we have to change as people. Maybe the white, I have to be very specific. I'm a WASP, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant background people. And it's better. What I'm saying is, after 50 years of changing inside as well as out, doing that reflection, showing up, doing uncomfortable things, I'm a happier, better, more loving, more connected person. It is better. It's better than being rich. It's better. And so I just want to say, discomfort is different for everyone. Discomfort for you, I'm imagining, is different for me.
But to your point, like, I honestly believe it is better for white people to understand that.
I agree.
Because if you don't, what you end up with a lot of white people, they get mad. And they get mad, like, why are, you know. Yeah.
Being angry all the time is
anger,
not better.
It's anger, and it's like, I had a guy, and I did a strip about it, wrote to the thing, why is everyone complaining about police brutality and this and that, like, blah, 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 like, why am I being made to feel guilty? And it's just like, you feel guilty because you're not doing anything, and and as much as you don't want to pay attention to it, your eyes see it, your brain sees it, your heart feels it, and you are feeling bad, and it's making you angry. But it's just like, if you just make some sort of effort to like understand what is going on, you know, and you know, there are always excuses. Oh, well, why didn't they listen to the police? Why didn't they, you know, this? Why, like, police are trained to supposedly act, you know, in a decent way in a situation. So people are always asking untrained black folks to be more calm than the person who has everything. They have the weapons, they have this, they have that. We're supposed to act more. You know, I got stopped by the police. The main gist of the show is based on something that happened to me 25 years ago, which is I had a cop, you know, stop me and hold me because I fit the description of someone robbing, and you know, and like, this person could have, they could have done anything to me, and the first thing they would have wrote about me is I was a rapper. Oh, he was a rapper. Oh, he had pot in the system, which very well could have been, you know, but I would have been vilified by this. And if to anybody who doesn't know me, they'd be like, oh, you know, well, he probably had it coming to him, you know. Now the people that do know me would be like, wow, that's screwed up. But it shouldn't have to go that far. We should be able to understand that all the power lies in the system and people who are part of the system. And in order for it to change, the people who benefit from the system the most have to acknowledge that and say, this is not right, this needs to change. You know?
Yeah, and also, before we just move on, another thought of sort of tension, doing the work, using sort of your whiteness to make progress. If anybody is on a board or in a leadership position in any organization, if you don't have at least one non-white person, like, use your voice to call that out. Don't be afraid to bring that up as a serious issue, because to your point, it's only going to help the organization, right? The 2,000 to 30,000, like, so many times I hear people, I have said it, oh, there's not that many people of color here. They are here. They're here. Yeah. They drive. I was talking to someone, they're driving an hour to go have a play date in Newton, okay? They're not going to our restaurants. They feel weird here. It's weird. Like, we gotta do that work, right? And like, so I guess I just wanted to say that if you have any power yourself, even in a friend group, if you could belong to like a, you know, what's that card game like older people play? Sorry, it's called Bridge. If you're playing bridge, and if there's no black people in the room, invite one and just, you know, like, bring them in, and, you know, like, reach out with your whatever you got. Like, just do it, because, you know, and I got kicked out of bridge once because I wasn't good enough, but that's fine.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's funny.
It leads into something else.
She's funny.
I was in Champaign. I did a presentation in Champaign, Illinois, and there was this art exhibit where there was this card game. Have you ever heard of this? It's called Trading Races, and it's a card game.
Thankfully not.
It's a game that has like all these different personalities on the cards. So it's everyone from Malcolm X to Maya Angelou to Oprah, but then there's like who's
Was it
the
like
woman?
Jeffrey Dahmer? Like, is it like would
No,
you rather
there's
be
Kevin
an amazing
Federline- there's
black
Kevin-
person or a white
Kevin-
serial killer? Is
there's-
that the vibe?
No, but it's Kevin Federline is in there.
Oh.
Tiger Woods, OJ, and basically what happens is you deal out the cards to everybody, and you get the cards, and what you have to do is you out-black you throw down a card, and you have to out-black all the other players, and then whoever has it leads to this discussion about who's blacker than who,
Yeah.
you know, and
Funny.
it's hilarious. You can only play it like 3 times because then you realize like no one beats Malcolm X, and like
Yeah.
just if you get that card, you know, you just wait. But it was in this exhibition out in the middle of Champaign, Illinois, and I'm like, oh my God, is anyone gonna see this? And luckily, I found out that this person sells them. So I bought like 10 things and sent it to the cast and sent it to my director and sent it all to my family. But it's an amazing game. It's crazy. It's, maybe I'll send one to you guys. I do have, it's crazy. Like the first thing, before the meeting starts, you should just put that down and say, we're gonna play a game, right?
See how that goes, right? I know in the interest of time, I have been asked to move into the Q&A section, but I would like to just, because I can't sit or stand at this podium as an educator and not leave this question, so I'll leave it and it can be part of the Q&A. Maybe someone will pick it up as they're asking further questions, but the role that you've highlighted teachers played in your own success story, right? Your AP Lit teacher, was it Mr. Hines? That was his name?
My English teacher, Mr. Hines, who gave
Right.
me the comic report. But
Right.
then a different professor, my first black professor.
Right, in your junior year.
Yeah.
It stuck with me because as an educator, this is what I do, right? I go in and I try to center not only myself as like, hey, there are teachers who look like us, but also, the frames that we talk about, Black history and such. And here in our community, I am going to share 2 quick vignettes. Quick, okay? I was at a cultural fest at the high school here, organized by the Social Justice Club, and one of our young folk, where I was asking him, well, what's your cultural contribution today? What culture do you represent? And he said, well, I run from the police and get shot. And I said, okay. He looked like a black identified person, but I didn't know if he was Latino or otherwise. And I said, okay, so what culture is that? And he's like African American. And I was struck in the heart space, okay? I have a son who's gonna go to these schools. And yesterday, I was at the Y, and I was walking from the steam room. It was 5 o'clock, and they were about to shut at 6, and a group of youth were sat there, and one of the young people turned, a white young man. He looked at me, he lifted his hand in the gesture of a gun. I will not make that gesture because I do not like it. And he pointed it directly at my face and shot while staring me in the eye. Now, I interrupted this because I am an educator, and I'm not afraid of a 14-year-old boy, believe it or not. And I let him know. I said, don't you ever do that to me again. I do not appreciate that gesture. Don't raise your hand and make that gesture at me ever again. Do you understand? He said, of course. I'm a mom too, you can tell from that tone. And I went back to my call, hung up, and then I sat down next to him, and I asked him, why did you do that? Why did you do that? Do you know why you did that? And he didn't have anything to say, of course. And then I said, do you know why I'd be upset that you did that? He said, no. And I said, well, I don't like when people put fake guns in my face and make shooting gestures because guns kill people. They're not funny. They're violent. And then I spoke with him a little more, and I spoke with the group a little more, and I had to go get my laptop from my car because I had to do work. And I said, I'm going to go get my laptop, and I'm going to come back. Don't be weird when I get back. because that's how you get in with the kids, act like them. And I was really struck by this moment because there was one black boy in that group, and when I came back, that black boy was talking to that white boy and calling him a dumbass. And I thought to myself, what is the experience of a black student in our public schools here? And I know that a lot of our community members say, it's better, because my husband went to high school here, and he tells me that when he was going to high school, there was like nobody of color. Now there's more visibility, but you'll hear people in the community say, we're not racist, we don't have this issue here. And then you wonder, who's answering that question, right? So what is the role, now that our schools have become a site of culture wars, essentially, and you can't ask, you can't teach critical race theory, not that it was ever being taught, just so you all know, but you can't teach the hidden histories or the hard histories or the twisted histories, because there's going to be that one parent, as an audience member just shared with me, who's going to call and complain, that one parent. So we sacrifice all of our BIPOC students, and they're thriving, and they're feeling like, I am a survivor. I come from a history, a lineage of strong, smart, industrious survivors. So to this call, we have those who are very loud, very much in the faces of public officials, the news, and saying, we want no CRT in our schools. So how do we intervene? How do we continue to make sure we're uplifting the communities of color that are always pushed to the side, the students, and making them feel not only like they belong, but that they can thrive. They can become whatever they want. And with that last question, I couldn't have left without talking about Ed. We will maybe kind of open up if you feel like you have something, but also the panel can jump in and just answer that. However it goes is how it goes.
I can just say, we will do what we always do, which is we will do it on the down low. We will do it independently of it's the same reason why folks communicated back in the day sometimes with drums, and it's when you see George Santos
Right.
doing the white power sign, like they've figured out a way to communicate to each other on the down low, and that's again, this is the stuff that we need to be innovative, and we need to be diligent, and we need to get people to understand that this has happened before. After the Civil War, the goal was to have Southern women get on all the school boards and say, you can't teach this, that the Civil War is about slavery. It was about states' rights. Like that, everything that's happened is happening now has happened before.
Everything.
And in 1961, segregationists put 250 black folks on buses, sent them to Massachusetts, and said, Kennedy's going to give you all these jobs and places to stay. Everything that's happening now has happened before. And so we just have to acknowledge that and get people to understand that this is the playbook, and understand it, be aware, and that it's happened before, and just identify and uplift, and that's the way to do it. It's not going to be given to you. You're not going to turn on the radio and it's going to be there. You got to find the good stuff. You got to look for it.
So we did promise there would be Q&A in the second half, but we are pretty much run out of time. But we can take a few questions from the audience if you want to raise your hand. We'll probably do maybe 3 if people have them. Anybody have a question they want to pose?
Hi, this is a question for Keith. With your children, how do you ever talk to them about how things were the same and different, and how they were different when you were growing up?
Yeah, I mean, that's what happens when you're a parent. You just start behaving like your dad did. Yeah, I mean, my kids are, I hope that that someday they'll appreciate it. But we homeschool our kids, so like they don't have to get up early. They don't have to go and listen to BS. They have to listen to my BS. But I just, we found it extremely important to make sure they learn from history. They learn from people that, you know, of various races and genders, and that, you know, I wanted them to make sure they have financial literacy, media literacy, racial literacy, just about a general, like, just guide to life type things. And, you know, they have a little bit of a distorted idea of what cartoonists are. They think all cartoonists just get TV shows and stuff. And, you know, I say, no, your dad worked for 30 long years and lived in, you know, I say, like, we lived in functional poverty for a very long time. And it's just, you know, I didn't even know how lucky I was until I went to New York. I had a convention in New York, and so many cartoonists came up to me and said, then by this time we had just shot a pilot, and they were like, you shot a pilot? Like, I've been developing stuff for years, so many different things, and it's never gone to script. Like, you actually shot a pilot. So, you know, I just realized just really how lucky I am. And I just say to the kids, say, listen, you may not know. I just hope, like, you get to an age you'll understand that, like, you just pursue, you're not on this earth for that long. And I don't say that to my 9-year-old, but I go, pursue what you want to do. Do what you want to do, because, you know, you're gonna you can fail just as much, just as easily doing something that you don't want to do than something you do want to do. So you might as well go for what you do want to do. And so that to me is just a really important thing. And yeah, just understand that it's just that, and just be decent to people, you know, be decent to people, and that not everybody is like that, and that's unfortunately, you know, but that's their problem. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. I try not to rant and rave, but, you know, I mean, you see me, I rant and rave all the time.
Any other questions from the audience? You ready to wrap it up?
Mm-mm.
Well, how about a round of applause for Keith and for the panel and for Tony? Thank you all for coming, and keep an eye on what's happening at the Meeting House. If you haven't signed up yet for our email blast, please do on your way out. So glad you could come.
I've got a few more prints over here too. So.
Yes, the store is still open on the piano.
Join the local NAACP. Go on Facebook for Gloucester Racial Justice Team if you want to get more involved, if you're not already.